everyone, it's Dejeanne. Today I'm going to come to you all and tell you about my uterine fibroid journey and my journey leading up to my emergency myomectomy. So if you would like to hear about my story, just keep on watching and we're going to jump right into it. Before I jump right into it, I just want to let everybody know I am not a medical professional. All information that I am sharing is all researched off of the internet, and also I have notes down here, so I'll be looking down quite a few times so I can read them out. Uterine fibroids, what are they? So uterine fibroids are tumors or lumps made of muscle cells or other tissue that grow within the wall of the uterus. Fibroids are non-cancerous growths. They may grow as clusters or as singles, and they are pretty common in females. So 20 to 70% of women will experience fibroids or a fibroid in their lifespan, and they do occur during childbearing years, reproductive years. What are the symptoms of fibroids? So common symptoms of fibroids are heavy cycles, huge blood clots or just blood clots during your menstrual cycle, anemia, fatigue, constipation, bloating, stomach swelling, and heavy cramping during your menstrual cycle. So all of those are the common symptoms of having fibroids or uterine fibroids. My uterine fibroid story. So it all started April 10th of this year. I had gotten home from work, got ready for the evening. My husband and I was watching TV, and then literally, I just passed a huge blood clot. I did not know what was going on. It just passed through my body. I was freaking out. I'm like, get a towel, because I was sitting on the floor while we were watching the movie, and I'm just freaking out. So that happened, and a few hours later, went to the ER. By then I wasn't bleeding as much. So went to the ER, let them know what was going on. I passed a huge blood clot. I don't know why, where it came from, what's going on. So basically they monitored me for a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And they only prescribed me iron pills. They're like, oh, you're anemic and you lost some blood, so here's some iron pills, which still never explained what was going on. So a few days went by, literally 2 days to be exact. I wind back up in the ER April 12th. I was still bleeding. By then I was passing huge blood clots. It was so crazy. So by the time I came back to the ER, and when the doctor finally saw me, he's like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you came in here. You're at half tank in terms of blood in your body, so we have to give you a blood transfusion. So I was just completely shocked, obviously, because I don't know what's going on. They're not telling me anything, but my history of just having heavy cycles, I've always had heavy cycles since I started back in the 7th grade. So I really never thought anything, about it. And they knew hey, she has heavy menstrual cycles. And by then I was just still bleeding, but I didn't know why I was still bleeding. So after the 2 blood transfusions, I was discharged, and then they gave me a prescription for tranexamic acid. So basically I was only given those pills for whenever my cycle actually came on. So whenever I tracked my cycle in the calendar or my app, as soon as my cycle came on, that's when I was able to take those pills 3 times a day for 5 days. And what that did, that literally just stopped the complete blood flow of just the extra blood that needed to come out, and then it literally just stopped my cycle just for those 5 days. May 5th, so few weeks went by. Mind you, I am still bleeding. I'm still bleeding. May 5th, when I woke up that morning, I woke up pretty early because I sat up and I literally felt like a gush. So I'm just like, oh gosh, here we go again. So I get up, I sit out in the living room, and I sit on the couch, and I'm just sitting here, and my body's just doing this thing, and I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm gonna pass out. So let me get in the shower so, we can head to the ER so I can go on back. Y'all, I literally got in the shower. I laid my clothes out first. I got in the shower, and literally I went to reach for the soap, and literally I remember waking up on the shower floor. I literally ended up passing out. That was the very first time I passed out. So naturally, like when I woke up and saw that I was on the shower floor, I was freaking out. And then I looked down, I saw this huge blood clot on the shower floor. All I can do was just sit there and try to process what was going on. My lip was hurting, so I realized I bust my lip when I passed out. And I was scared mainly because I didn't know how long I was out for. So that was like another thing. So when I was in the shower, I had closed the bathroom door. Usually I keep the bathroom door open. So my husband is still asleep. So I'm like, call his name. So by the time he comes to the door, he didn't open the door because the door was closed. And he's like, you know, what's going on? I'm like, open the door. Because by then I'm like so weak, I couldn't get up or anything because I have lost that much blood from the night prior and that morning. So he walks in and he's like, what? Like, where are you? I'm like, I'm in the shower on the floor. And he pulled the shower back and he was just like, what? Like, I was freaking out. He was freaking out. All I could do in that moment was still like literally sit there on the shower floor, and literally the water was still running on me this whole time. And that was the only thing that was making me feel well in that moment. So I sat there for like another 30 minutes or so, and then I finally got up to finish washing myself off. And then I want to say like 2 hours later, so by then it was like noon, almost 1 p.m. in the middle of the day. That's when I, you know, mustered up the strength to make it back to the hospital. Went back to the ER again, and they're like, okay, now we got to do an examination on you. So by then they performed, before I even got the examination done, they gave me 2 more bags of blood transfusion. They're like, you are so low. And I'm like, I passed out. And they're like, okay, now it's like, now we really have to look at you. So after my blood transfusions, they went and they took me to another floor because I ended up getting an ultrasound and a transvaginal done to see what was going on, because they've already expected that it was fibroids, but this just further confirmed it. So ultrasound was done, the transvaginal was done, and it was confirmed that I did have fibroids. How big, how many, I did not know at the time. So again, they still told me to take the tranexamic acid, get some rest, and monitor my bleeding. If, of course, if I'm still bleeding, come on back. Fast forward again. So June 12th, I had a follow-up appointment with my gyno doctor. And so by then I was still letting her know, hey, I'm still taking the tranexamic acid, but I am still bleeding, still passing these huge blood clots. Everything was still going on. So she tried to prescribe me something called Provera. So it literally did the same thing as tranexamic acid, but I still had to take it like 3 or 4 consecutive days in a row. And then by that time, my cycle was just about to come on a few more days after. So she said, once my cycle comes on, stop the Provera and start taking the tranexamic acid during my cycle flow. So again, that was a Friday. So Saturday was pretty okay until Saturday night. Saturday night, here we go again. Passing all these huge blood clots, losing all these bloods. Mind you, in between this whole timeline, I'm still going to work, and one point in time on quite a few of my shifts leading up, I had to literally keep leaving work to come home to change my clothes, because I would literally bleed through my clothes. That's how bad it was. Or I had to leave early from work because I was just so fatigued from losing so much blood and still trying to be on the go and be a great employee that I literally was still losing blood and just was not 100%. Saturday evening, literally still bleeding, passing the blood clots, but that morning everything was fine. The bleeding had subsided, so I'm thinking, okay, the Provera is working. The medicine's working. This new med pill is working. No. So again, 11 p.m. that night, still passing blood clots, and I'm literally back and forth to the bathroom because I literally feel myself filling up my sanitary napkin like within 15 minutes of changing it. And I'm like, okay. So in my head, I'm like, all right, we about to go back to the hospital again. Here we go again. So the very last time that I went to the restroom, like as soon as I stood up, I literally felt the lightheadedness, and I told my husband immediately, I'm like, you gonna have to take me back to the ER because like I feel like I'm about to pass out. And so before I even fell out again, I'm like, okay, let's just go. So by then, like I literally couldn't walk a few steps at a time because I was just literally so lightheaded and weak. Like I really could not walk. So my husband was trying to carry me down the steps. It was just so crazy. Head back to the ER once again, and they're like, you was just here, and they're pulling up my history, and they're like, you've been here for the last 4 or 5 times for the same thing. Like, okay, like this is really serious now. So I'm just going to rewind just a little bit. So when I went to my doctor's appointment that Friday, the 12th, my doctor was just saying like, hey, you're going to get a phone call next week to schedule your MRI. So everything was moving in slow motion just a bit for my liking, because after all these visits and, you know, the pills that they're giving me, I still was suffering from the exact same things, the huge blood clots, major blood loss, etc., etc. So fast forward back to the hospital, June 13th. So back to the hospital, they get me in there and they're like, okay, you're staying. We're keeping you and you're staying because now it's crazy. So they put me in a room because now they have to do another exam on me to see, okay, we know you have a fibroid. We need to see how big this thing is, where it's located, because now like you literally cannot function and you keep showing up 2-3 weeks at a time. So they put me in a room. Another gynecologist, she came in and she started to do the exam, and when she inserted the instrument, it literally clamped down and literally flew out. I literally felt like something like push it out. So, and I told her, I'm like, well, I think that was the fibroid. So she had to, you know, do a hand exam. And she literally felt around, which was very uncomfortable. And she's like, yeah, this is definitely a fibroid and it's huge. I'm like, how huge are you talking? So she said, give me 1 second. So she started pressing around my stomach and she's like, the size that I'm feeling, judging by your stomach size, is about a 20-week fetus size. I'm like, are you serious? So she's like, it's that big. So she's like, you're definitely sane. I'm going to call your doctor and she's going to come in, talk to you about, you know, what the next steps are. Because I had, I tried to tell that doctor, I'm like, hey, is there a way, you all can do like emergency surgery? Because like now, like, I'm over it at this point. I'm tired of bleeding. I'm tired of the blood clots. I'm tired of feeling like I want to pass out. I'm tired of the blood transfusions. Like, I'm literally coming here for the exact same thing over and over and over again. So she's like, well, there really wouldn't be an emergency surgery because that's an outpatient thing and this isn't really considered an emergency. But I'm like, me losing more than half the blood in my body and coming here and each visit I'm having at least 2 blood transfusions is not an emergency, right? So hours went on by, I'm like knocked out in the room, and then they're like, since we're admitting you, we're going to transfer you upstairs to your own room. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I get transferred, more hours go by, and then I finally see my doctor around 2 p.m.-ish, around 2 p.m. This is still the 13th or the 14th. I'm getting the days mixed up, but it literally rose into, it's the 13th, I'm sorry, it's the 13th. So finally see her and she's like, hey, you're back again. And I'm like, yeah, I'm back. And I literally just had an appointment with you yesterday. So she's like, okay, so obviously the purveyor didn't work. I'm like, yes. So she's like, okay, we're gonna fast track everything because now you're gonna need that MRI like now. We're gonna get that MRI done for you. And I'm gonna call the schedulers and we're gonna move your surgery up. because the way how she had it set up initially, my timeline was going into the very next week, they were going to tell me my MRI date. So that's me waiting like another week after to get my MRI, waiting on the results, and then waiting another couple of weeks for my follow-up appointment. So now by then a whole month would have went by. And now after my during my follow-up, she would tell me what my surgery date will be. So she has said she will reach back out to me once she knows when her availability will be open with the schedulers. So throughout the day, I just stayed in bed. This time I got 3 blood transfusion bags. While they were rotating between the blood bags, they were giving me tranexamic acid through drip form. So I'm literally getting saline, blood, and tranexamic acid like all simultaneously. So I ended up getting 3 bags of blood, and then I had like 3 bags of tranexamic acid, and they literally kept me on the biggest bag of saline that entire day because of how much blood I lost and everything that was still happening in my body. They were literally trying to stop the blood from flowing actually, and still giving me that medication, but still feeding blood back into my body. And then just me being so fatigued and everything, they had to give me the IV. So that was a very long day/night because they literally had to keep giving me medication. So the very next day, which would have been June 14th or 15th of this year, that morning they woke me up, they gave me breakfast, and they're like, okay, you're gonna get discharged tonight, but you gotta get your MRI first. So a few hours went by, so around like 12, about noon-ish, 1 p.m., another doctor comes in, they're like, okay, we're about to get ready to take you down to get your MRI. So I'm like, okay, cool. So the MRI that I had gotten was with the IV contrast, where naturally the IV was already in my arm because of the saline and the blood transfusion. They had to insert the contrast there. So once I was going through the machine and had to hold my breath a few times, he would let me know towards the end. He's like, hey, we're about to get started with the IV contrast. So I felt it start going through my arm. That whole process happened, and then we finished the MRI. So the whole process of that took about 30-45 minutes. So right after that, I was taken back up to my room and just waited on my doctor to let me know when I was able to go home. So by then it's about 2-3 o'clock, and they're like, okay, you're gonna go home. We're gonna discharge you around 4 o'clock. So you know that didn't happen. So I ended up getting discharged around 6, maybe 7 p.m. But before that, my gyno doctor came in and she let me know my surgery was going to be that Thursday, which is June 17th by then. She said, you're going to have this surgery because I don't want you to keep coming in here getting blood transfusions if you're still bleeding and everything is still going on. The backstory is that I've always had heavy cycles, heavy menstruals, crazy cramps. I've always had it since I started my cycle. The irregular cycles that I was experiencing, it started last June to be exact, June 2020. Once my husband and I were trying to start conceiving and try to have a baby. Once my cycles would come up after we started trying, like, I would spot. Sometimes I would spot before my cycle would come on, then it'll be a regular cycle. Or my cycle would come on and then I would still be spotting a few days after, right after that, another cycle would just be regular. So that was happening all of like the rest of last year up until March of this year, where once I came on my cycle in March, I never stopped spotting. So that's how this whole process started. So I never stopped spotting in March until April the 10th when I passed that blood clot. So again, before I got discharged, my doctor did let me know that my surgery will be on that Thursday, June 17th. So they were trying to figure out if they wanted to keep me in the hospital until surgery or let me go home. I'm like, please let me go home because I have to get stuff together. Got to get some last minute things. So discharged me and they told me to come back 5:30 a.m. that Thursday for this surgery. If you are interested in hearing about my myomectomy surgery and recovery, go ahead and click on the second video, which will be part 2 to my uterine fibroid story. Again, thank you for watching and listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there. I try my best to tell the story as best as I can and include videos and pictures so you can kind of see, you know, what was going on. And in the part 2, you will see, you will hear about my surgery, also see the recovery process, and then weight loss that came with it. So again, thank you again for hearing me out. And I hope I helped someone through this. And remember, you are not alone. We're all women. We got to stick together and we all go through things. So again, I will catch you guys on part 2. If not, thank you again for watching. I am Dejeanne. Please subscribe, like, or comment any questions that you want answered below. And thank you again for watching.